Hello and welcome back to Absurdity, where we discuss all things absurd in religion, culture, and society. I am your host, Ryan Becker, and I am joined by our wonderful co-host, Henry Johnson, who is basically my other half. And I don't just mean that on screen for YouTube. I really, he's just this beautiful person that I consider very close to me, to the point that he officiated my wedding just a few weeks ago. So
he's laying this on thick, making up for the fact he abandoned me for a woman.
Facts. That is facts. So the several months ago, when this case broke again, because it happened 6 years ago.
Are you saying he's a repeat offender?
Yeah, unfortunately. But we did an episode on Josh Duggar, which took off on YouTube to the point that now that the case is going on, that episode of Absurdity is getting a lot more views even now. And
no traffic.
I hadn't even realized the case had started until that moment. Like, until I started seeing comments pop up on that episode that's, 8 months old at this point, or 7 months old at this point. It was I had no idea that the trial had started. And so it did start in November. And so we wanted to come back and do an update on this, not just because that episode was a bigger one, and there was a lot of listeners that have come as a result of that, so we want to honor that journey, but also because this whole thing is still absolutely ridiculously absurd. And no, if you read that title and thought from the original episode that we were talking about it in a, like, it shouldn't be a case, no, we didn't mean it's absurd in the bad way of, like, we disagree with what's happening, but rather it's absurd because it just is absurd. Like, it's just ridiculous. The whole thing is wild. And from the family to the religious affiliation to the case itself and the details to his wife to how they released him on bond several months ago while he was awaiting trial. I just every facet of this has been wild. And so to give a very, very, very quick update on this, and then we want to jump into it. But Josh Duggar is charged by indictment with receiving and possessing child pornography. It's 2 counts, I believe. If he's found guilty, then he faces up to 20 years in prison and $250,000 in fines for each count. So $500,000 and up to 40 years in up to $500,000 and up to 40 years in court.
In court, you mean in prison?
Sorry, yeah, in prison. And
now, is there a possibility of those being concurrent sentences? Because sometimes we say, because the fine can double, but sometimes they'll go, he'll serve 2 20-year sentences right on top of each other, so it's 20 years.
I don't know. He is a white male in America, so maybe.
Facts.
So that is an interesting thing to note, and very relevant to the abortion things that are happening right now in the world, or in the US too.
Another episode for another time.
Yes. So I know his dad also testified when they were trying to determine whether or not his old sexual assault and scandal cases could be used in the trial as evidence against him.
Litigated,
and his dad suddenly stopped remembering very specific things that were said at one point.
This is the part that started angering us. We're like, let's do this episode again.
Because dad says he doesn't remember the specific wording, and he said he may have touched a few girls. It was right around the age of 14 when his hormones came up, and it was his sisters. Those were the girls, by the way.
Might have touched our kids.
And because I don't remember what specifically said, and the prosecutor asked again, and he said, I don't remember. I don't remember. And then he asked the judge if they could stop this line of questioning, and the judge is like, I'm the one in control of this examination. You will answer the questions, and if that are asked of you as they are asked, and if someone has a proper objection, then I will hear that objection. But otherwise, you will continue answering this line of questioning. Which is amazing, and I'm really glad the judge said that and did that. I don't know, though, if at the time of us recording this, which is December 6th, if that was open for relitigation. I don't think a judge actually had ruled on that, at least when I was looking into it.
Well, yeah, and relitigation is probably is I pretty certain not the correct legal term.
No,
They're
it's
not actually
just
trying him on that. What they're meaning is, what's the term I was looking for? Admissible is information and details from those charges or cases or whatever admissible in this one. That's
yep.
You can tell I'm not a pre-law student,
and it's worth pointing out too that this is a pretty damning case for Duggar. So in court, a federal prosecutor, William Clayman, asked James Futrell, a top forensics investigator at the Department of Justice, about the in-depth forensic analysis he conducted through Duggar's work computer at Wholesale Motor Cars, his place of work. And basically his testimony involved minute-by-minute analysis comparing when child sexual abuse materials were downloaded on a discrete partition of the office computer. That's basically when you separate your drive into different sub-drives, essentially. So like you have your hard drive on your computer.
What you're doing.
Correct. Or to install a second operating system, which a lot of people will do for software
like
development.
Linux stuff,
correct, yeah. Which is what he had on a second partition. And he matched the minute-by-minute analysis comparing when the data was downloaded, when the materials were downloaded, and the time of and place of photos and messages on his old iPhone. And the times of the downloads on the work computer correlated with the iPhone photos Duggar took at the car lot, as well as text messages he sent from the phone identifying that he was at work. There's pretty much, they even had the vice president of Covenant Eyes, which is a anti-pornography software that sends reports to people that you choose of your internet browsing activity. They had the vice president come in and basically explain that, yes, you can get around it by having another partition, because the partition in another operating system won't be using the same browser or in the same, unless you manually install it. And no, you can't access it remotely because it's a partition. Like, you have to boot up your computer from nothing, from turned off. You have to boot it and select which partition you want to boot from, which section of your drive you want to boot from. You have to remote connect to, the only way you can remote connect to a computer is if it's connected to the internet. A computer that's off can't be connected to. So this is pretty damning on him just based on that alone. And the case is not even, or the trial is not even over yet. So this whole thing is ongoing as far as what is continually coming to light, how widespread these issues are, how in depth a lot of these issues are, with more stories coming out of, from neighbors and friends, family friends as well, for Josh Duggar's, his story and his, what he's done to people. And I'm not going to detail everything. I wanted to detail just enough to kind of give you a picture of how bleak this looks for him. And then kind of just use that as a jumping off point from there. But Henry, I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on things so far and where you are in all of this. I can tell you I'm enraged by it, not the trial, but by just what the trial is about.
Well, I mean, yeah, our initial disgust and horror at the whole reason for the trial to start with still stands. I mean, and for me, and again, to preface it, you're right, I don't know the mind, and as a Christian, I have to assume the best about people and just let facts weigh what they are. But just looking at the facts and my limited understanding, the thing that makes me most angry about why this has kind of come back in the news is the father. Okay. This is just my feeling, but take it for what it is. I fully feel like he was willing to admit what was wrong and going bad when the initial thing blew up and it looked like I'm going to lose money. TLC is going to shut down our reboot or whatever else. And everyone's going to think we're monsters. And so we need to show, no, we're just as victimized by Josh as everyone else. And now that 8 months has gone by, whatever, and you feel like it's faded in the light of abortion scandals and tower collapses and shootings and what, it's kind of like they're trying to play the new political playbook, which is you just wait for other scandals to overtake whatever.
And you don't
hope that it sucked all the oxygen out.
And you say, I don't recall. I don't remember. I don't recall.
Yeah. And so then you deflect and you kind of just backpedal and you really not keeping up with it.
Yeah.
All they can remember is, oh, well, I remember him confessing and they felt bad and they were betrayed too. And okay, I'll keep doing whatever. And who cares about the small minority that's mad at you anyway, because you figure they're not watching your stuff and aren't going to have an impact on ratings anyway. And now you start the backpedaling. And to me, what makes me angrier about this is not, I mean, he's not the first to do it. obviously we were just talking about it. It's a trope that people have been doing before. What makes me angrier as a minister is, again, this was his own freaking daughters that were
Yep.
molested by this guy. That made me angry to start with. And now you're going to re-victimize them and throw them back under the bus to protect your little scumbag beanbag over here, so that you can take a few bucks. I mean, the Bible is absolutely true that the love of money is a root of a lot of evil.
Yeah.
Okay. And it disgusts me in the name of God. They're going, well, I don't recall, or it probably isn't my daughter's. Again, I'm not in the court. I don't know exactly how he said it. But the thing that angers me so much is that from all appearances, he knows exactly what he's doing. And it sickens me that, again, they're going to, I'm sure, I wasn't in the court. I'm sure somehow some sort of language of grace and religious whatever is going to get sucked back into this. And, well, we're a family of faith and we believe in what, well, I believe in it too. But, spoiler alert, 1 Corinthians 13, right? Love, which is the definition of where grace comes from, the definition of God, it does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices in the truth. I don't know where Christians have gotten this stupid idea that somehow because I forgive and I'm grace oriented, that somehow that does not mean accountability for evil.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If I truly, I honestly, I think as a pastor, I deal with this all the time. I think it's because people are more interested in people liking them in the name of loving them than actually loving them, which sometimes the most loving thing to do is to let consequences hit people in the face.
Well, and
right? I can forgive you, but that doesn't negate the fact that now I need to protect X, Y, and Z from your sinful, disgusting behavior. And what does this do to these girls to be like, oh, we're followers in God and we're showing grace to your brother who molested you over and over and over again. And now I'm going to stand up in court as your dad and be like, I don't remember. I mean, it could have, could we stop this line of questioning? Burn. I say this, I know this sounds horrible, and don't get me started on my views of hell are probably different than the traditional thing people mean by that. But if it was traditional, can we put him in the lake of fire already? Because I'm really done.
Well, and look, I'll say this because neither of us actually do believe in a literal burning hell. Just as a side note there, but theologically,
well, I mean, we believe there's burning, but it doesn't last forever. Anyway,
yes. The big thing here is that eternal salvation does not eliminate earthly consequences. That's just the bottom line with a lot of this stuff, and that's how we would even if he was. Which their offshoot version of their religious beliefs are not normal or standard Christianity and is far more akin to a cult than anything else. That's beyond the scope of this episode. What I will say is while I dislike and disagree with the way his family has especially his parents have protected him throughout all of this, and it'd be one thing if, yes, at 14 this happened, and his sisters to this day decided that it was a mistake. They have accepted that and they welcomed him back in, and there's no issues there. That's on them. The victim, to me, it's about empowerment of a victim. And if they, as victims of his behavior, have decided now that they want to defend him, they have every right to do that. And I won't criticize them specifically for them deciding to do that from their experience. I do think, though, there is a duty to protect other people, and there typically is a desire to prevent other people from the same thing that has happened to you. Most people typically have that kind of reaction when something bad happens to them. But the kind of other side of this is I don't know I almost kind of feel like referencing Scientology here and saying that I don't know what the religious pressure looks like in all of this, especially for his wife, who after all of this comes in with his legal team and him holding hands to his trial.
And by the way, that, again, we're not in their marriage. I don't know what's going on. To be fair, this is just our reactions on assumption. I do admit, and so take it for what it's worth. Now, that also reminds me of the tried and true political trope where these congressmen and whatever, they come out and they find out they've had an affair. And next thing you know, the re-victimization of their poor wives, because they probably find it out through the news the same way as everybody else, I have a funny feeling. Or they find it out like an hour before it breaks because some of the staff found out and told them, and they're like, I'll get out in front of it. And then they hold hands and put on a smile and they drag them in front of all these banks of cameras and stand out there and go, this is between my family and I've fallen, but my wife still loves me and we're going to work through it. And I feel like they're just a pawn again in this game, and they're further victimized, and then everyone turns the lights off and we go back about our ritual, and it's just like,
Yeah, it's and like you said, we can't really, anything we say about her is speculation. But I can only wonder what's going through her head in all of this. And there's part of me that wants to shout, like, if you need help, blink twice. And then there's part of me that wonders if not she's necessarily in on it, but if she really does support him, and if that's, she really took better or worse as seriously as she possibly could have. And the difficulty with all of this is, yes, the details of it, the way his family is protecting him, and the way he just seems to, the way he just seems to be completely insulated from the consequences of his actions. And there is another side of this, though, that I did want to quickly touch on, and that's the defense. Because I know that's technically the same side, but I mean a side of the conversation, which is, they actually filed several motions prior to the trial starting on suppressed evidence. They filed a motion to dismiss at some point. They filed several motions on basically what were very seemingly dubious claims, and it feels like already off the bat there, like the defense asserted at one point that that his computer could have been hacked remotely or utilized remotely to do all of this. There's no way to prove it was really him, and they tried to say that the forensics person, while he was going through Futrell, I think was his name. Futrell. While he was going through the computer connected to the internet for a brief amount of time, and they thought that may have. They try to argue that may have skewed his results of his investigation and analysis. And
he just planted something on this partition.
Here's the thing. There are times where defense attorneys and the defense is objectively, they're terrible people. But the defense,
they have a job to do.
They have a job to do, and that job is constitutionally vital as well.
Yeah. Everyone has a right to a defense.
Everyone has a right to a defense, and their job is to make sure that the state does its job right. Because otherwise,
they make their case.
Yep. And I was reading this in a comment section, I think on Reddit. Someone basically shared, that was a defense attorney, had shared, I would rather 10 guilty people go free than one innocent person go to jail. And another one who was a former prosecutor said, that I would rather defend someone I know is guilty to make sure that there's accountability to the state than I would, as a prosecutor, be putting people away on dubious evidence and claims.
Yeah.
And there is how can you possibly defend someone you know is guilty? The reason you're not there to get them off scot-free, you're there to make sure the state does its job. Because if there was suppression of evidence, if there was mishandling, if there was anything shady that happens here, that can set a precedent for that happening in the future, and the state being able to use that against innocent people to put them away too. There is a lot at risk, and the defense plays an important role. And I think that's a question a lot of people have is how can they defend someone that is so, like, clearly, it seems from here, guilty. But that role is incredibly vital and important. And I would say, let's watch carefully. Rittenhouse, his case was a great example of this. Not whether or not we agree or disagree with the verdict, but it was a great example of this because of how the prosecution handled that case.
Yeah, the prosecution, I don't think, did their homework.
No.
And I mean, there was even at one point where the prosecution was trying to use arguments, not to switch cases, but they were using arguments that, to me, I was like, that's something I would expect the defense to do. And they were making it like, trying to turn it into a trope of this evil man over here. And I'm just like, what in the world?
Yeah. So I just wanted to touch on that because I thought that was really, really important and something to keep in mind throughout the trial and throughout all of the crazy trials that have been going on this year. Because what is 2021 other than trying to one up 2020?
No mercy. Yeah, I don't like the name 2021 because it makes it sound like 2021.
Yeah, right.
But and at the same time, again, we're not in the minds of defense attorneys too. The old trope. I'm sure there's corrupt ones out there too. I mean, that's a whole different episode for another time. The fact that I can totally see that the American justice system is heavily biased now towards means. And I'm not trying to say every lawyer's corrupt like the joke. I mean, I really do feel like in America, justice can still be had, but only if you can afford it.
Yeah.
You're kind of in a middle zone now where the system does still work, but you have to lubricate it. Defense needs to be had. There's part of you that when I see defense attorneys throwing a whole lot of process arguments out, you start wondering, do they really know they're guilty? And so they're just fighting on things that they can feel comfortable at night having fought on. I mean, but I'm not in their brain. And that might be one thing. If there's a defense attorney, a public defense attorney or something that's watching us, listening to us somehow, that would be fun. If you reach out to us, please. Contact information is in the show notes. It would be great to have you on and walk us through your process of how do you address that? I mean, we don't want to approach it like you're a scumbag. No. I mean, tell us, because you're the one that has to live with yourself. And I'm not, that almost sounded accusatory.
Yeah, that definitely
sounded, how you're doing. But no, I mean, I would love to know that fascinating, like, tell us the arguments we're not even thinking about, we're kind of with you in the sense that everybody needs a defense. I mean, everybody. You could be some horrible, everyone saw you on TV shoot 12 people, Alec Baldwin, but we need to, sorry. Nice reference there.
Well done.
I don't know how the gun went off. You pulled the trigger. Okay, so that's how guns work.
Usually.
But now that usually, but now I'm going off track on that. But the point is, we could see it on TV and everyone can say, there's no way they can't be guilty. And they still need a defense attorney. They still need someone to go, but wait, you don't know what was happening behind. So if you're willing to come talk to us and tell us, hey, this is how we work through that, and this is why our passion is doing this or whatever, and you guys don't fully understand this element, tell us. We'll put you on. We'd be happy to have you on and have that discussion. I think that'd be cool. But,
well, and there's something to be said here. You mentioned earlier about everyone does need a defense and have a defense, but you also had said that it is for those who can afford it. And one interesting thing I discovered recently, I did not know this. So, the whole, like, if you cannot afford one will be provided to you.
Yeah.
There are many people, many people, whether they go guilty or whether they get off they get acquitted or they're found guilty, they end up getting billed for the defense attorney that's provided to them's fees. Because I did not know that until a couple of weeks ago. I was reading, and in some states this is the case. And the kind of argument is the law says that we will provide you one, the state will provide you one, not that the state will pay for it. And this is a real thing that happens. Like, prison absolutely financially ruins people, and that is one big way that it happens. If you accept a defense attorney, there's a chance that you get the bill at the end.
So basically, you won't have to pay it up front because you don't have the money, but you're going to scrape it for the rest of your life, pay for it afterwards.
And also, you won't know that you owe it so you won't know to budget for it or do anything about it, set aside funds for it until you have the bill already and you're in prison and can't do anything about it, or you're moved on with your life.
See, this is the first I've heard of this. This is a live reaction, and that is like a gut punch. That makes our legal system look like it sucks even worse. I was like, well, at least you get the free one. They're overworked.
No, they're not. They're not always free. But I don't know what states, but I also know there's a big scandal in Florida with the fact that, not scandal, but a big thing in Florida, especially, where people that have served their time end up being arrested again because they haven't finished paying off certain fines or fees for their time in prison.
Congratulations. We knew where to find you after 10 years, and here's your unpaid parking ticket bill, and now you're back in court.
And because slavery, because the 13th Amendment basically allows for slavery within prison systems, it also means that those prisoners can never earn enough money to pay off that debt. Essentially,
and we thought stamping license plates was the bad part of it.
Yeah, essentially making them lifetime slaves to the system with no real hope or chance of getting out and putting it really behind them. It is because they can't vote. They also can't vote if they still owe. If it's a felony and they can't pay back the fines or fees either.
Well, now that this just took a turn for whatever, let's bring this back to an equally disgusting moment. And now that we have like 20 different episode ideas that we can run with, but back to Duggar and the disgusting stuck in the 13th Amendment prison system, and as in that's where Duggar should be, in my opinion.
Yeah.
More thoughts about that case?
Well, I think this is going to be one where we see a positive outcome from the side of justice, and I think we've seen that one other time with the Ahmaud Arbery case. I think we saw justice prevail there as well with a prosecution that was just absolutely incredible. Watching if you've not seen clips of the prosecutor that actually litigated the case,
and
it's
to
amazing.
Be fair, justice this side of eternity, because obviously he's still dead.
But
ultimate justice is he's not dead. He doesn't have a gaping shotgun wound, and anyway.
But this to me speaks of the magnitude and importance of us dealing with some of the more problematic and darker areas of culture that exist within religious circles, and the toxic masculinity, patriarchal nature. I remember seeing a clip from I think Josh Klepper is his name, but the Daily Show dude that goes to all the right wing stuff and interviews people. He interviews one guy that talks about how it's important that we need to respect women while wearing like a really disrespectful shirt about Hillary and Clinton, and doesn't even see the irony in it at all. I think it's a Trump that B word on his shirt, but he talked about respecting women and how that's really important to us and we should do that. Well, and now I've completely lost what I was. Yep, it's gone now. I forgot why I brought him up and what I was saying because
patriarchal culture.
Thank you. There was one.
I listened to you.
He was talking to a woman at a Trump rally, and he asked her, "Do you think that a woman should be president?" She's like, "No, women can't be president. They would start. We're too emotional. Women are too. They're too unpredictable, and they would. If a woman was in office, she'd start a war just like that." And then Klepper literally goes, "But haven't all wars in history been started by men?" And she's like, "Well, yeah." And that's kind of it. Then it cuts away because they just
now to be fair, before the comments start rolling, I'm sure there are Democrats that think the same way and unaffiliated. And
no. This was just a very specific
Trump supporters specifically.
This was just a specific moment. And to be fair as well, those are cut to be funny too. There could have been any moments of self-realization.
Context.
Is some of that is edited out too. So this isn't like a dig specifically, but it's just those. But that patriarchal culture is embedded in a lot of us. When I was pastoring, I remember seeing or wanting my church members to go before me, but women who'd grown up in the South and in rural South part of South Carolina and never left this small town were like, no, they're 60 years old. They've lived there for 6 decades. And they're like, no, the pastor goes first. The men go first. The women eat after. And we want to make sure that all the men have food. And I'm like, no, I want to make sure all my members have food. And so please go get food. And that was just butting heads of culture.
So they literally said the women had to go last? I thought it was just pastor had to go first.
No, pastor had to go first. And a lot of them, because they were the ones who set up for potluck and fellowship meal, they were the ones who stayed last, like to make sure everyone got food or the food was swapped out for new dishes or whatever. And so that was some of that there. Some of it was kind of just logistics. But either way, they were still heavily resistant to the idea of them going before me for food. And that was just a struggle that I had. It wasn't a big struggle or a hill to die on, but it's just indicative of that. We have a lot of work to do within the church, regardless of denomination. We have a lot of work to do in regards to, and I would say, if you don't know what to do, it starts with the way we treat our kids, what we teach our kids. If we want to do better in this area, it's going to require educating from the ground up too. And so focusing on that kind of education.
Defending them, unlike Mr. Duggar is doing.
Correct. And defending them and making sure that they understand boundaries, making sure they understand consent, making sure they understand. I love there was a tweet that went out about every straight man understands consent in a gay bar. Consent is a really important thing for us to learn, and same with boundaries and understanding that. And So there's a lot in advocacy and education that we can do, but that's one thing that can be really, really important to do, is to make sure we're respecting and honoring the boundaries that others have, practicing that in our own lives and living by example with that as well. But I am anxious to see how this continues to play out, but we wanted to give a short update on this. Henry, anything you want to add here?
I would just add to what you said. Also, make sure to put your own house in order first. I have dealt, even in my ministry, with people that had parents or people in ministry or of authority that allowed certain things to happen to their children.
Mm.
And rather than defend their kids or deal with it then or whatever, they sacrificed them for ministry or appearances or whatever. I mean, this stuff is more common than we think. It doesn't just take a weird Christian cult somewhere in the middle of nowhere that has a television program. There's people that sacrifice kids for far less.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to say that, and it's disgusting. And it happens even within our own communities.
Yep.
So, we advocate for this too, but this is another clarion call to look around and put your own house in order. We need to be like, well, I might not can control the Duggar case, but I might can speak up in this case in my local context that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
And I would recommend we do that.
Well, and can I add to that? You said it's important to defend your children too, and we don't mean defend the way that Jim Bob Duggar has defended Josh. We also mean accountability for their behavior and understanding when they've crossed a line. We don't mean just defend them from all consequences and protect them. We also mean you said it earlier, the most loving thing sometimes that we can do for someone is allow them to experience the consequences of their actions and their decisions.
Yeah.
So,
and I know I'm not a parent having to choose one kid over the other ones they did something to when the crime has happened, quote, in her family, but I've dealt with a situation like that too. And so I admit I'm not a parent yet. I can't imagine having to deal with that, but just in my non-parent logical brain, I would think, well, the most loving thing to do is get them the help they need, which might be consequences hitting them, and protecting more than one kid in the situation of the other ones that are being affected by the. Again, I know it's a horrible position to be in. It's almost like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. But the problem is you have to do something, and I'd rather you err on the damned that you do than the don't.
Yep.
So what a great phrase to end that.
Yeah, right? But with that, that's going to be our update on this episode. So we hope you've enjoyed our conversation, or as much as one can with this whole mess. But thanks for slogging through it with us. If you have any thoughts or anything you'd like us to cover or talk about, please make sure to let us know. You can see our contact info in the description, or you can leave a comment if you're watching on YouTube. But with that, we're going to call it here, everyone. Thank you so much for listening, for being a part of this journey with us, and we'll see you next time.